the syllabus for the formalism part. So we yeah, probably I have kept something open. Okay. So what we learn position, uncertainty, measurement observer, and all these things. So these things, this part is over. The basic postulates we discussed about it, except one postulate which is associated with dynamics, which I'll come. Then the interpretation, of course, we spent time on interpretation in discussion and one lecture. We learned about the mathematical formalism so far, the bracket, linear algebra, all these things. All these things we have already learned, and today I will actually, since you said this is a bit of heavy stuff, so I will actually go over this thing in a more compact and abstract language, and of course you are feel free to ask me many questions such that this part is whole clear, absolutely clear. So this will be the last day we'll spend time with this part, and this is very important part, because everything rest you will do in the rest of the course is application of this. Okay, so now there is one thing I missed in that syllabus I gave submitted, that I missed the statement of dynamic. So today we'll go over this. So then we will do two more things which I didn't write here, but it is of course a very important part of the formalism, that is to do the dynamics, that is how to incorporate time dependence. You already know this. When you do that you get Schrodinger equation, but how exactly this comes from this bracket formalism and how it looks like. So we'll do that after this week, and then we will do some case study. The case study is a full case study. We'll do all kind of two-state system. We already did a bit of case study in a two-state system, that is spin half system. But we'll see that all these systems which are are kind of two-state systems, like double slit and ammonia molecule, benzene, and Rabi oscillation. There are various kind of other systems which can be described in this similar effective. Any system with that whose basis, there are only two basis states, can be marked as a two-state system, and their physics has some overlap, there's some similarity, and that is one of the power of this kind of formalism. There is a universality or universal structure, even though the systems are completely different, wildly different, their mathematical description is same. Okay, so that is what we learn, and then we will see that we will drop this topic for now, the concept of density matrix. I'll bring it back near the end when we study and entanglement in this course.
Sir,
Okay,
your voice is
and
getting
then I will.
broken, sir.
Is it, how is it
Can't
now,
hear
right
much.
now? Oh, that is a problem, because I
It's breaking in between.
you should give a ping immediately after the voice is broken, then I will repeat that particular statement. But this is a bit weird, because I did a 2-hour meeting few days back with this and this is a defined internet connection, and somehow it is not working so well. Am I audible and clearly now?
Yes, sir. Right now it's fine.
So give if it is not clear, give a comment in the chat box. So then I know, then the notification will come. I'll immediately know, or say it, speak it out. Like then I will repeat that statement. Okay. Okay. So the next thing we will do is case study of a two-state system, and then we'll extend these two states into infinitely many states, and we'll see all this wave function and all those things we have learned already. They form under this framework of infinite state or a continuum infinity of state. So that is the plan for next this week and next week, and that will complete the formalism, the whole formalism. After that we will do problems in the sense like well established problem, not exercise problems, such as like one-dimensional systems, two-dimensional systems, and eventually three-dimensional systems. So that is the plan, and so let's start with the formalism, revisiting some of the points you already know, and then go on to explain and elaborate further each of these points. So the first point I tried to establish is that a quantum mechanical state is best represented by a ray in Hilbert space. And by Hilbert space, we mean that it's a projective complex vector space. Although in the textbook you will find often people talk about this as a vector in Hilbert space, but if the language is not very strictly followed, like people doesn't use a strictly mathematical description and call it projective vector or something. But whenever they call it a vector, you keep in your like mind, it is actually a ray, and the ray in the same sense that's a unit vector whose neither direction nor magnitude matters, but only the relative direction matters. We established this point already, and there are infinitely many states which can be dealt by the same vector, or that is the meaning of it being a ray. So every state have two vectors. Again, I am using the word vector because most textbook use the word vector, but it's actually a ray. So have two representation. One is a bra, another is a kate, and their fate is that when they meet, they give you a scalar, and that is 1 in this case. That means they are normalized. And if they are two different objects, one bra and another kate, they give you a scalar which is a complex number that is equivalent to inner product. We learned this already. Now the next point is an act of measurement basically produces a state, a product of another state. So that's what you have seen, that when you measured SZ, you started with a psi and you landed on the plus Z. So it's a kind of a transformation process from one state or one ray to another ray. So the way to go from one ray to another ray, we know that how we can convert a vector into another vector. That is by multiplying it with some object called a matrix or an operator. And we call it an observable because it usually an act of measurement means you know the position of something, you know the spin of something. So you have observed something, and the quantity which you observe are called observable, and they are represented by some matrix operator. And we also learned that there exists a special set of states for which an act of measurement produces the state itself with a complex prefactor. So those special states for which an observable produces the same state with some prefactor, possible prefactor, are called eigenstates. For other states, it is not necessarily the same state; it's some other state. So, and we also have realized from the properties of eigenstate that these eigenstates span or they form a basis in the Hilbert space of that particular observable. And of course, remember that the dimensionality and the details of that particular observable depends on the physical context. For example, if you measure the spin of an electron, it's a two-dimensional Hilbert space. And if you measure the position of an electron, then it's an infinite dimensional Hilbert space. So those details depend on what are you measuring on that object. And then what I try to say that means even if you have an arbitrary operator and you measure this A on some arbitrary psi, that psi should be expressible by because this forms a basis, will be expressible as a linear combination of these vectors or these vectors. So that is what we learned already. So that is the property of eigenbasis. Now I will talk a little bit about the representation of an
So just one clarification.
Yes.
Here we say an act of measurement changes the state, and we call that an observable represented by a matrix. But a special set of such observables which do not change the state, basically eigen, we still call that an observable. So isn't it supposed
it is still an observable? No. Imagine this system. So if you have whenever you have a confusion, think of the experiment. Plus Z, you passing it through plus Z. What do you get? Plus Z. It doesn't change the state of the observable, right? Change the state. Why it doesn't change? Because you will see later that plus J is an eigenstate of Sz. So when you do this plus Z, so this fact is represented in this case. So there is
So your voice is broken again, your video has stopped.
So that is the meaning of an eigenstate, and here is an example of that. Is it clear?
So we lost the audio in between, like for quite some time.
Oh, so is this point clear now? I think now I have to definitely do something about this internet connection.
So we couldn't hear you
So
since you
this
started explaining the experiment.
we heard the example part about the SG experiment, then we lost the voice.
Is my audio is disconnected again?
Yeah, we lost you in between again, but right now it's connected.
Oh my god, this is really a big problem. How come
Yep.
am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
It was totally disconnected. I think as long as I have this shitty internet connection, I have to rely a bit more on the pre-recordeds. I will try to figure out a better internet connection. I thought it will work because it was tested for a 2-hour meeting, but somehow it is screwing up again. Anyways, so are you convinced about this point that if there is a special set of
So
observables?
I think you have to share the screen.
Oh. So are you, so even till I share the screen, are you convinced about this point that there is a special set of state and observables for which the act of measurement produces the state again? Okay, this is this example. Okay, so for this kind of so these kind of examples are the cases of like that, where when you are performing an act of measurement, you are performing it on an eigenstate. So such that then you are getting back the same state with a prefactor, which is this plus h by 2. Are you clear about this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about representation of operator of Hilbert space. This part is a little mathematical, and it is not a part which is based, like if I say some mathematics, it won't make sense. You have to read this part, but I will go over it quickly. Okay. So an operator, so the statement is an operator can be represented as an outer product. This is a mathematical structure. So why it is that? Because let's say, what do I want from an operator? I want an operator to act on a state and give me another state, or like a vector and give me another vector. So now you can see, if you write your operator as a object like this, so these kind of things are called outer product. If you write it like this, so this is an inner product and this is an outer product. So if you write an outer product, an operator like this, and then you split this part, you say this alpha and psi is like an inner product now. So then you can say this is a complex number, this is a complex number times the another state. So that is exactly what you want from an operator. You want an operator to convert a state into another state with some, a prefactor may or may not be there, that is not important. So it turns out that if you can write an operator in terms of an outer product, it serves your purpose. So this thing is called associative axiom of multiplication. It was first Dirac used it in the context of quantum mechanics. So now you can define an X dagger by an opposite, by flipping these two vectors. So are you familiar with outer products? like if I give you two vectors, two column vectors, let's say a1, a2, a3, like that, b1, b2, b3, like that. So you know you can take a dot product like a1, b1, a2, b2, like that, right? But if I give you a vector like that, so where is b1, b2? So when I'm doing this, I'm doing effectively doing a dot b, or I'm doing a. If I write in vector notation, I'm doing this. But if I do this, for example, if I do b a, so then this b, the column vector will be here, b1, b2, b3, dot dot dot, and the row vector will be here. So do you know how to define such an object? How to
You get a
calculate?
matrix.
You get a matrix, right? So you know already. Everyone else also knows that, right? So this is the meaning of an outer product. Okay, so I will just assume everyone knows, because now what I'm doing here, b1 a1, b1 a2, b1 a3, like that, and then b2 a1, b2 a3. So this is how a outer product is defined. You get a matrix out of an outer product. So based on that idea, you think that you should be able to write this, since this X is a matrix, which takes a vector to another vector, one should be able to write it as an outer product. Similarly, one should be able to take a dagger of that, which is just flipping these two, and so on. So now this is a
Sir?
little, yes.
What does the beta and alpha physically mean for the operator?
Yes, that's a very good point. So I will come back to that point very precisely. So let's say, so I will come back to that in a moment. I'll give you a very precise example for the spin half Stern-Gerlach case. That how do you physically construct this operator? Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I'll come back in a moment, because it basically tells you how do you, so you can write a matrix in different vector spaces, right? In different bases. So in this alpha beta basically means you are writing it in that basis of that vector. So what does it mean precisely? I will come back in a moment in a particular physical scenario. But right now take it as a mathematical statement, because you are acting this X on a vector alpha or a vector beta. So when you are writing this X in terms of this alpha beta outer product, it means you are writing the matrix in that basis of this alpha beta vector. What does it mean precisely? That I'll come back. Okay, now you can show this kind of very simple things which I am not going to discuss. Just all this thing is from Sakurai, so look up into Sakurai. So that it is just that if you take a beta X alpha, and if you take a dagger of this, so how you can construct this alpha X beta, these kind of structures. Very simple structures. And it also tells you very simply that if X is a Hermitian, so then X dagger and X are equal. So these kind of things. So these are some very simple properties of writing the matrices in some other notation. Okay, now let me come to another important point. So let's understand a little more physically that what is the meaning of a eigen, or what are the possible eigenstates of an observable, because we just established the point that a observable, which is a matrix, will have a special set of states or special set of rays, such that when it acts on those rays, it will produce that ray itself. Nothing special. So that is the physical intuition behind an eigenstate. So here we already realized yesterday that the eigenstates, we want this to be, we want them to eventually represent some kind of a measurement, and in order the eigenstates to be real, the operators have to be Hermitian. And also we realized, already understood these things, that these eigenvectors are forms of orthonormal basis. We discussed these things already. So there is a comment. Is it because connection is lost, or there is a conceptual problem? Can
Yes,
someone
sir, he's asking if the connection is getting lost in between. Like there are a few small breaks in the audio.
Okay. I hope it is okay. I hope it is fine, because it is showing at least me the full connection. But one thing is clear: this connection will not work in long run. Okay, I'll do something about this, and sorry about that. Okay, so we realize that we can write, and I will of course give a recorded version of this lecture for all the choppiness. So so now if we realize that an arbitrary vector in this space can be expressed in terms of its eigenstates. So that is what we already discussed. And we discussed various examples to show what is the coefficient of this expansion, and this coefficient can be written as this kind of inner product. So that basically that is equivalent to the statement that you can express an arbitrary vector, a real vector, the kind of vector you are used to thinking in a basis, and each component along this basis can be found by taking an inner product of the vector with that basis itself. This is again something you have studied very much in various courses. And we also realize that an alternative way to see this expression is by saying that this alpha is nothing but identity times alpha, where this identity is expanded in terms of this object. So this thing is called completeness, or it is basically a statement that in any basis, if you take all the vectors of the basis, if you take an outer product of them and sum them, what you get is an identity matrix. So that is basically a statement of orthonormality. It tells you all the vectors of this basis are mutually orthogonal and they are also normal. Now each of these individual operator, they are called projection operators, and you take a sum of them, and that means you get one. So you will understand a much more deeper physical meaning of this projection operator in a moment, and also in an example which I'll do tomorrow. But right now, think of this, that if you have any basis, so that basis, the basis vectors have a relation like this, which comes from the orthonormality. This thing is called also completeness, and each individual vectors in this each individual component is called a projection operator. Right now, it is just a name, projection operator, and I will show in a moment why it is called projection operator. So this can be written also a sum of this projection operator. Okay, so that we've gone through this. These are all revisions, so I'm trying to go a little fast. So the way to show is that take a inner product of alpha with itself, which is basically, then you can apply this. You can say it is alpha identity alpha. So this identity can be used in using this projection of using this resolution. This thing is also called resolution of identity. I can expand this by this. So then it becomes just a alpha prime square. And we know already from examples that this thing is actually the probability amplitude. So the projection of this state gate on this particular eigenbasis, and a sum of this is basically sum of probability, the physical statement of that. Similarly, now I will explain in a like what is this projection operator. So if I apply this particular operator a prime, so let's say I have this operator, only this operator, nothing else. Apply this on a state A alpha. What will I get? I will get a number which is a prime alpha. Let me call it CA prime and A prime. So that means it projects the state. So if I start with a state alpha, I apply this operator that projects the state into one of its eigenstates. Sorry, one of these basis states. I don't know. I don't yet have the notion of eigenstate in this particular language. But A prime is of course an eigenstate of some observable. But we know for now this much, that this is a basis state, which means an alpha is this sum of all its basis state. So this operator basically projects that alpha, like throw that alpha into one of these basis states. So and this particular basis state A prime, that's why it's called a projection operator. Okay, so it selects that alpha that is parallel to A prime. That take out that part of alpha which is parallel to A prime. Is it clear so far? This is a repetition of old stuff, so I hope there is no problem. So is it clear so far, and the connection is sound so far?
We
At
lost
least
you a
it is
couple of times in between, sir, but I think it's okay. It's manageable.
Okay, I hope overall it is fine. So I think this week this problem will persist because I came at a different place. I came at my home from some other place, and not you. That will take 2-3 days. So I have to, till then I have to use this mobile connection, but don't worry, I'll again supplement everything with recorded lectures. Okay, everything is clear so far conceptually, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now we will express an arbitrary operator in terms of this basis. So this is again something you already know, but if I have an abstract vector, let's say I have an abstract vector A. So I need a basis I need a set of numbers. To get that, I need to write it in terms of some, I have to write it in some basis, in some form, right? So that is usually as we have understood. So we did it like that. So alpha is basically A prime alpha. So this is basically my this is basically my basis, and this is the number. So then you can express this arbitrary vector in term of this number. Then it becomes, you can write it like a matrix and like a vector form. So I will do the same process for a matrix. So where I have this arbitrary an abstract operator X, and then I expand it using these two resolution of identity. Remember, both are identities, and identities can be resolved like that. So there has to be a sum over both A prime and A double prime. So then this object, you realize that this is if this is a row vector, this is a column vector, and so on. And these are so if there are n numbers, there are also n numbers. So this is n square numbers. So these n square numbers can be written in terms of a matrix. So that is what you mean when you say an operator is written in a matrix form. It is written in terms of some basis vectors. Okay. So this basis vector is nothing but, if I write in terms of component, is this object. This is A1 x A1 and A1 x A2 and blah 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 and so on. And again, you can show that this basis vector, if it is Hermitian, it has to satisfy this kind of property. And similarly, you can so this is purely mathematical, but you can also connect it with the physics, because these basis vectors are nothing but physical basis vectors also. So now you can also try to explain. So this is a little bit of exercise you can try to do. So what if I have a product of two operators or a product of two matrices? How I can write this in terms of as actual, like plug in the resolution of identities in the middle and show that it is actually a product of two matrices, nothing but a matrix multiplication, an inner product, an inner multiplication of two matrices, and a product of two n square matrix give you another n square matrix. So just show that. So these things are, again, this is narrating mathematics. Narrating mathematics is not so useful. You have to read it from the book, and I'm just doing it for formality, but the best way is to, when you read it. If you don't read it, you will forget everything, this part. Okay. This is not a conceptual, it is a bit conceptual, but it is mostly about learning a language. It's like learning a language. It is nothing more than that. You have to speak and listen in that language. If you don't do that, it will become like Sanskrit, like an academic language which you don't know how to use properly. Okay. Okay, so now the inner product again can be defined in terms of this resolution of identity. If I have a alpha beta, I plug in an identity in the middle like that, and then I can express it and call it like an inner product, and so on. The outer product again can be expressed like a resolution of identity and can be shown that outer product is actually a matrix. Okay, so I'm not stretching it further, rather I'll go on and talk about an experiment. Not experiment, talk about a practical system where all this abstract idea will come in some form. So now one more last bit of thing, which is, if I have an operator such that which I want to express in terms of these A primes, but these A primes are its eigenbasis, which means the operator has some kind of a relation like that, some scalar A prime. So A prime is some number. So now, can you guess that what will be the form of this operator in this basis? Can someone tell me what do you expect the form of this operator in this basis?
Diagonalize?
Yeah, that's right. So you will expect this to be diagonal. Why is that? Because this A prime will give me a scalar, and that scalar will come out. And so then what will be left is A double prime and A prime, and this is their orthonormal. They can be non-zero only if they are the same thing. So this matrix will be of diagonal form. So that means you basically understood the matrix representation, but I will still want you to read it once, and all these things are from Sakura. So now let me give an example, because already somebody asked this question. that how will I make sense of this? Like how will I construct this operator sz? Okay, somebody asked me this. So let's try to do that. So let me start with an experiment. How will I know that what are this alpha beta for a given operator? What can I do about it? So let me give an example. So this is one of the Stern-Gerlach experiment you have already gone through. That we know that if I every psi, an arbitrary state psi, can be expressed, every arbitrary state psi can be expressed in terms of some plus z and minus z. So let the simple Stern-Gerlach experiment tells you that, this simple Stern-Gerlach experiment. So this plus z and minus z form some kind of a basis. And we know also that intuitively by doing this experiment, because if we do this experiment, we know that if I pass a plus z beam to the SGZ device, I get a plus z with full certainty. That tells me this must be true. But if I take a plus z, a minus z beam and pass it or a plus z beam to the SGZ, it is guaranteed that I'll get 0% minus z. So that tells me this much is also true. That plus z and minus z has no overlap with each other. So they are two perpendicular directions. So if it is plus z, it cannot be minus z by any means. And similarly, there is a similar equivalent relation which we already established. So if this forms a basis, so they must satisfy a relation like this. Okay, plus z, minus z, which is the resolution of identity or completeness. All the vectors together which forms a basis satisfy this. Now we expect this sz, when acting on plus z, will give me a plus z. When sz acting on minus z will give me a minus z. That is what this experiment tells me. But it also tells me that it must come with a prefactor of plus minus h bar by 2, because we know that the amount of deviation and from all that, we know this thing is either plus h bar, because if this is plus, this is minus, and vice versa. So let's say this one is plus, so this plus h bar by 2 and minus h bar by 2. How can we know that even at one further level? We can try to see by after I perform the measurement, if I do another plus z, so that thing we have already established that thing is given by this kind of an object. So what is the probability of getting a plus z if we measure it with a plus z? So this expectation value or the average is that tells me what it should be. So we know that to be plus h bar by 2 from the experiment. So then you know that this guy has to be this, because otherwise you will not get that. So then what kind of operator will give me this? What kind of operator will give me this kind of relation? So it turns out, so that means I have to get a minus for the minus z and a plus for the plus z. So a simple possible way to construct this operator is this. So now if you add this guy on this plus z, this will give me a plus 1 and plus h bar by 2, and this give me minus z and plus z will give me 0, this part will drop out. But if you add this on a minus z, you will get a minus h bar by 2. So that is one way you can construct this operator even if you don't know anything. But you have constructed this operator in this basis, which means you have written this sz in this basis of plus z and minus z. That is the meaning of that. And that need not to be the only case, because we know one should be able to express this also in plus x and minus x. And we will do the detailed case study, we'll see all those examples. But let's just for now work with this example. So now let's see how to make sense of this whole business in a matrix form. How to write down this whole thing in matrix form. Is my connection on?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let's say we did this example already. So let's say I have a vector which is written as a linear combination of C1 and C2, which is the superposition principle. And this thing is basically, you can write it as these two vectors, which you can write, for example, if I have a x vector, which is 2i cap plus 3j cap, just like that. You can write it as a 2, 3 kind of vector like that. So it is similar to that. So now let's say I want to give it a structure. Let me call the plus z. So this map it to some 2D vector space. So this is just it is like a x direction, and this is like a y direction. So the x direction is 1, 0, and y direction is like 0, 1. So there are two orthogonal vectors, so I can represent it like that. Okay. So now if I have introduced this already, how will this sz will look like? So this sz will look like, this will look like 1, 0. this will 1 0, and this is also 1 0, this plus z, but an outer product I have to take. So if I take the outer product, this is 1, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0. So this is this, and similarly this is this. So when I do that, this Sz takes this form. So this is the famous Pauli matrix of Z component, and that is how you get it starting from this. So remember, it is the Sz in the Z basis is a Pauli matrix. In a similar way, you can find X and Y in the Z basis. You will get the other two Pauli matrix. But this is a complete choice of yours. You can write an Sx in X basis, then it will become this matrix, but in the X basis. So when you specify a Pauli matrix, the famous Pauli matrix, you usually call it, this is the Z, this is the X, this is the Y. But they are the X, Y, and Z in the Z basis, all in this Z basis. When you go to other bases, they look different. By that I mean they get permuted. So try to internalize this point. But for now, is this particular example clear to you? Okay. Is this one clear to you?
Yes, sir. It's fine.
Okay, good. So now test this point again by using this, plugging in this matrix. So write down this matrix equation, you will say you get exactly this. In a similar note, you can write an arbitrary state like that. Let's say I have another state phi, which is written like that in this basis. So now you know the act of an operator on this side will give you a phi. So in order to get that, how do you represent that? You can represent this again by a matrix, which is multiplying on this vector and this giving you another vector. So this problem now becomes a problem of matrix algebra. Okay. So that is the point of this. Now I will come at a critical conceptual issue, which is the measurement. How do you talk about, so this is no more critical for you because you know thoroughly what is a measurement, what it does, but how to bring it into this language. Okay. So here is one point I want you to appreciate, because it just occurred to me right now, but I want you to appreciate the beauty of this theory. So you must have realized by now that you already realize that superposition principle and the basic facts of quantum mechanics are one of the most weirdest experience human mind have ever encountered. Okay, it's mind-boggling. It totally doesn't make sense. But the genius of this mathematical structure is that these very weird facts, the weird set of facts,
He lost connection.
We lost her.
hello, is the connection back now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you now.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
The shared.
Yes, sir. We can see the presentation.
Back and appreciate the. Okay, good. So now I want you to take a step back and appreciate the beauty of this formalism or the structure of this theory, that it brought down a very weird set of experience, a very weird set of facts into a very crisp and precise mathematical formalism, where you will see that it boils down to solving a quantum mechanics problem means almost it is the level of solving some differential equation or solving a matrix algebra. Don't get me wrong, there are still many conceptual issues which people research on these days, and those are mostly complexity related. But the main point is this is where you should appreciate that this kind of thing happens in the hand of geniuses like once in 100 years, and this is the actual act of genius, which brings down a very complicated very complicated or very weird thing which is unstructured, and you don't know how to proceed even, it is so weird, and it brings down to a machinery, a well-oiled machinery of some mathematical formalism, which at the end of the day any fool can solve a differential equation or or diagonalize a matrix. Of course not any fool can do that. You will see that in a little bit of complicated system, when there are many particles involved, these problems becomes intractable. So you need a different kind of physical insight. But for the time being, as far as single particle, one particle is concerned, you appreciate this point, that this is now, it is much easier to developing the, after once the language is developed, it is much easier to think about this problem. So this is the job, actual job of a physicist, is to bring down a complex set of half information, broken information, is information which doesn't make any sense, to bring it down to a precise mathematical structure which anyone can solve. So that is the main task, and in order to do that task, you have to think a bit critically. So in order to train yourself for that task, you have to think a bit critically. So when you are asked to do a problem, don't just think about that problem. Think about that, where that problem came from, what does it mean. If there are different ways to solve that problem such that you can compare your result with one way and another, then you know your result is right or wrong. And it is not like someone gave you everything and you have to solve a differential equation and get the answer. Someone gave you a formula, you have to plug in a number, get a number, and say, oh, this number is this, like this wavelength is this frequency is this, like that. It should a physicist should not train themselves like that. A physicist should train themselves like to, and that is our job. Like a job of someone else is to do, like a job of a doctor is to understand a complex human organism and fix it with the problem. Our job is to take a piece of information, a broken piece of information, convert it into a very nice machinery with conceptual clarity, such that we can predict things, we can do useful things. So this is our job, and keep that in mind when you look at this formalism. Try to read Dirac's book, try to understand a little bit in depth that what was going on, why did he did that, why did he do that. Like, try to understand the choices he made. Like, there are various choices he had, and some choices he made, how that helped him. If that choices would have been different things, and there are actually choices, people do it slightly differently. There is a formalism due to Schwinger, you will see, which is entirely projection operator based. Everything is in terms of projection operator. There are slightly different ways to do the same thing, but this is the most standard way, and something which is most useful to think in terms of most problems. Okay, so am I audible this part? Did you hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so try to think a little deeply when you read. That is the bottom line. Okay, and try to appreciate the beauty of this theory. It is like came out of nothing practically, and then it became a very nice theory. Came out of some very weird thing actually, then it became a very nice theory. Okay, so now how the act of measurement is expressed in this language. We know what a measurement does. A measurement throws a system, or in language of Copenhagen interpretation, it collapses into a system into one of its basis states. So you start with a psi, you pass it through a SGZ device, you get a plus Z or minus Z. So that point already we understood and realized, that is basically in Dirac's own language. It says that the disturbance involved in the act of measurement causes a jump in the state of the dynamical system. So when someone says something like that, you might think, oh, the psi earlier was both plus Z and minus Z, but cause of the measurement caused it to be one of these two states, which is basically the language of collapse. He is calling it a jump. Okay, it is just a different language of saying the same thing. And in the and which of these states, again, that depends on what kind of measurement you are doing. If you are doing an X measurement, it's plus X minus X. If you are doing a Z measurement, it's plus Z minus Z. So it is the eigenstate of the dynamical variable or the observable you are observing. So that is a fact. That's a postulate. You cannot go any deeper on that. This is an observation. Why it is true? That again, it's philosophy. But given this philosophy, given this point, how do you express a measurement in terms of this language of linear algebra? So before the measurement, the system is in some state alpha, which is expressible in terms of all of its eigenstates. And after a measurement, the system collapses on this A prime. Okay, so it collapses on this A prime, which means you get this A prime. So what if you measure A again on the same A prime, you will get the A prime again. That you already experienced by when you looked at this sequential SGZ Stern-Gerlach experiment. So this fact, this like collapse, once collapsed, it is there. So that means if you, it is equivalent to saying when you performed a measurement, it already got in a state and then you cannot change that state by another same measurement. If you do a defined measurement, then something else can happen, that we have seen. If you do SGX and SGZ, it something else can happen. But the same measurement will not change anything. And in what kind of second measurement it will change, I will come back to that later. That is the point of compatible measurement that will lead to the uncertainty principle. Okay. So now this alpha is expressed in terms of this A prime, and we have already seen this by introducing resolution of identity. And that statement basically tells you, if you perform that measurement, what is the probability amplitude of finding it in this state is this, and the probability is square of that. So in Copenhagen language, we'll call it in terms of collapse. You can again check it using this particular set of Stern-Gerlach experiment. All this abstract statement, always go back to the Stern-Gerlach and make sure you understand it in case of there is any confusion. Okay. Even if there is no confusion, even still you do it because you think there is no confusion, there might be one actually. So now I will use a word called pure ensemble, because in terms, when you talk about probability, you need to talk about an ensemble. That means that in a given experiment, what happens, it is of course a language of probability usage is the probability of that happening. But to actually make sense, to check this is true, you have to perform many measurements, and this many measurement will give you something. Then you say, oh, that was the probability of that, if you don't know it A prime. And most cases you don't know. So in order to talk about probability, you need a large number of particles, and they are called, that is called pure ensemble. What is a pure ensemble? Where you guarantee you have a large number of states which are exactly in sight. How do you guarantee that? So for example, in this experiment, you can guarantee it by passing this in a sequence of 2 filters, 2 SGZ. So now you can guarantee what is coming out of here is a plus Z. There is no exception. Okay. So this one way to get a pure state, or like an ensemble of pure states. So that is called pure ensemble. When you cannot guarantee that, when you mix these two. So for example, in the modified Stern-Gerlach experiment, I showed you one mechanism where you have a SGZ and then it goes through a modified setup, or like an SGX, and this plus X and minus X are fed together into a third device. So this is a mixed ensemble, which means it's a statistical, a probabilistic mixture. But if you don't perform a measurement, it's a superposition. So that is called a pure ensemble in the language ensemble. So just keep in mind this language. I'll show you an example, or I will show you cases where you mathematically formulate both of these, pure ensemble and mixed ensemble. That is the language of density matrix. But right now, let's stick with pure ensemble only. There is no mixture. It is just a pure state of psi. Okay. Now again, we already have gone through this. We wanted to say a measurement must have a real number associated with it, which is given by this. So this average measured value over large number of measurement, and we interpreted that as this as an average. And we show why it is an average. Again, you apply resolution of identity twice. It becomes a language of A prime. So this gives you an A prime, and this gives you an probability. So that is just like you measure, you calculate an average. So that's why this is called an average. But just to remind you that it is coming from an amplitude, call it an expectation value. Okay. Now I come to the point of compatible observable. I will spend a little time with that because now the time is almost over. This is already something I already told you, so I will just go quickly over it. What are compatible observables? A simple language. Let's see how they are coming into the picture. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's say you pass a state through a SGZ. You have already seen that experiment. Half of this is plus Z and minus Z. You pass it through a X. Half of it is plus X and minus X, and then again Z. Half of it is plus Z and minus Z. So as if when you are passing it to the third say, it forgot that it used to be a plus Z before that. So that tells you cannot know this X and Z together. So how do you express this observation in this linear algebra language? So let's see what do we need for that. So an act of measurement of SZ will project it into a plus Z. So that much we know, okay, with some probability amplitude. Now, if you do an Sx on top of it, it will give you again, you can write it as like this SZ psi is C plus Z, and then you act an Sx on it. So this will give you some state which is not the same as the original, which is not plus Z. So that is what is your experiment suggest. But if you do two consecutive SZ, that means SZZ, SZZ, two consecutive SZZ, you know it is guaranteed that you will get a plus Z with some coefficient, and that it makes sense from here also, because this SZZ, because you already know you are doing two measurements of the same observable on the same state. That means you will get, once you get a plus Z, it will stay plus Z. So that comes into this. Okay. So how do I consolidate this observation into some abstract language? So let me develop a field for that. Let me take an arbitrary state psi and arbitrary state phi, which are eigenstates of these two observable A and B with eigenvalues A and B. So if I perform a measurement A, so I write it as A psi, and then I performed a measurement of B on the outcome of the first device, which gave me A psi, which did the measurement A psi. I can write it as A times B psi. Okay. Now, if this psi is an eigenvalue of B, let's just assume this psi is for some reason an eigenvalue of B. I get an AB psi. Okay. So then I can guarantee, if I do two measurements, two defined measurement for some reason, and I still get a state which is same as the original state, and that can happen only if this psi is an eigenstate of both A and B, both of these two operators. In this case, they are the same operator, but it could be different operator in some general case. So when that is true, AB psi is nothing but a scalar times psi. And when that happens, you can guarantee that whether you perform A first or B first, it doesn't matter. So you can show that if AB psi is this, similarly BSI will be also BSI, so these two will commute. So the meaning of the statement that nothing special happens when, in the most generic case, when you perform two measurements consecutively, nothing special will happen. It will be the same state. It will be same projected state. If both, it is an eigenstate of both of these two operators or both of these two observables. Okay. Is the opposite true? Yes, the opposite is also true, because you can show that if this is true, if you start from here, then it is guaranteed that this AB psi is equal to BSI, and that can only happen if this psi is eigenstate of both of these. So this is a very sketchy proof. I'll don't worry, I'll consolidate this proof and give a very concrete argument that why these are true. But one thing is clear from there, that compatible operator, by compatible I mean two operators, mathematically two operators which commute, they are called compatible operator. These compatible operators will have simultaneous eigenstates, and this statement makes sense also physically because of this experiment, which showed that if I perform the same measurement twice, I'll get the same thing. And a more little generalized version of this, if I perform two defined measurements, but it is such that it is performed on a state which is eigenstate of both of these two observables, I'll get the same result. I won't get any of this peculiar Z going to X and then X going to Z. Compatible, I'll come back to in a moment. But here is a theorem. I want you to look at the proof of this from Sakurai. I have given the proof of it here also. It's a very simple theorem to prove. And I want to revisit these examples, which I'll show you tomorrow, how to exactly solve this example. I gave this example in the last class. I'll show you exactly how to solve using
We lost him.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we can take some, do some Yeah, it is terribly bad actually. So I'll just close it for today, and we'll see something about that. The most comments today are lost audio, lost. Yeah, so it's a very grim situation. Okay, that's all for today.